A billionaire finds two twin girls alone in the park, sitting next to pink suitcases. When he asks where his mother is, the answer leaves him in shock. The children had been there for 4 days, waiting silently under the rain. Without knowing it, he embarks on a journey that will change everyone's life forever. If this story has interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you will ever hear in your life. He thought of his own childhood, of the promise his mother had made to come back for him when he was 7 years old, a promise broken not by choice but by circumstances beyond her control. He had spent years in foster care, building walls around his heart, learning to trust only himself and the cold logic of numbers and business. But those two little girls sleeping in his guest room had somehow slipped through those walls in the space of a few hours. The next morning, Jonathan woke early and found the twins already awake, sitting quietly on the edge of the bed, their hands folded in their laps. They had put their clothes back on, the ones Mrs. Chen had washed and dried overnight. "Good morning," Jonathan said from the doorway. "Are you hungry?" They nodded in unison. Breakfast was a revelation. Mrs. Chen made pancakes and eggs and fresh fruit, and the girls ate with the same careful precision they had shown the night before, but there was something different now. Emma smiled when Mrs. Chen gave her extra strawberries. Emily asked if she could have more orange juice, small things, but they felt like victories. After breakfast, Jonathan's phone rang. It was David, his head of security. "I found something," David said. "The footage shows a woman, matching the description leaving the market area 4 days ago. She was crying, kept looking back toward where she had left the girls. She walked toward Pine Street, and then the footage loses her." "Send me everything you have." Jonathan spent the morning reviewing the footage, watching the grainy images of a thin woman with dark hair, her shoulders hunched against the rain, walking away from her children. The body language spoke of desperation, of heartbreak, of impossible choices. He expanded the search, calling in favors, using every resource at his disposal. By noon, he had a new lead, a key. Street artist who worked near the Angel mural remembered seeing the woman. "Yeah, I remember her," the artist said when Jonathan met him at his usual corner. "She was there for a couple days with those two little girls, quiet kids, never begged, never bothered anyone. That's probably why nobody really noticed them. In this city, if you're quiet enough, you become invisible." "Do you know where she went?" "Last time I saw her, she was heading toward the main avenue. She looked upset, distracted. I remember thinking she should be more careful crossing the street the way she was, just walking without looking." Something cold gripped Jonathan's heart. When was this? 4 days ago. Late afternoon. Jonathan made more calls. He contacted hospitals, checked accident reports, spoke to police officers. And finally, late that afternoon, he got the call he had been dreading. "Mr. Hartwell, this is Dr. Martinez from Seattle General Hospital. We have a patient who was brought in 4 days ago after a traffic incident. She's been unconscious, and we haven't been able to identify her. But based on the description you provided to the police, she might be the person you're looking for." Jonathan's hands were shaking as he drove to the hospital. He left the twins with Mrs. Chen, not wanting to expose them to the uncertainty until he knew for sure. The woman in the ICU bed was thin and pale, with dark hair spread across the pillow. Machines beeped steadily, monitoring her vital signs. She had a scar on her left hand, exactly where the note had mentioned. The age was right. The timing was right. "She was struck by a car while crossing the street," Dr. Martinez explained. "The driver said she seemed disoriented, walked right into traffic. She's been in a coma since she arrived. We're hopeful she'll wake up, but we can't be certain when or if that will happen." Jonathan pulled out his phone and showed the doctor the photo he had taken of the twins that morning, both of them smiling shyly at the camera. "Can I leave this here?" he asked. "So when she wakes up, she'll see that her daughters are safe." Dr. Martinez nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. "Of course." Jonathan placed the photo on the bedside table, propped up where it would be the first thing Sarah Richardson saw when she opened her eyes. Then he pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. "Ms. Richardson," he said quietly, My name is Jonathan Hartwell. I found your daughters. Emily and Emma are safe. They're warm and fed and cared for. They're waiting for you. So you need to come back to them, do you understand? They need their mama." There was no response, just the steady beep of the machines. Jonathan returned to the penthouse as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The twins were in the living room with Mrs. Chen drawing pictures with crayons on large sheets of paper. "Did you find Mama?" Emily asked immediately, her eyes searching his face. Jonathan knelt down so he was at their level. "I found her," he said carefully. "She's in the hospital. She was hurt, but the doctors are taking very good care of her. She's resting right now, but I left her a picture of you both so she knows you're safe." "Can we see her?" Emma asked. "Soon," Jonathan promised, "when she's a little better. Right now, the best thing you can do is stay here where it's safe and warm, and know that your mama is being taken care of." Emily touched her bracelet, her fingers moving over the beads. "Mama always comes back," she said with quiet certainty. Over the next few days, Jonathan fell into a routine he had never imagined. He woke early to have breakfast with the twins. He worked from home conducting video conferences while Emily and Emma played quietly in the corner of his office, coloring or reading the books Mrs. Chen had bought for them. He visited the hospital every evening, sitting with Sarah Richardson, telling her about her daughter's day, showing her new photos. And slowly he began to understand the pattern on Emily's bracelet. It was Morse code. The black and white beads spelled out a message, 12, and hope. He didn't know what it meant yet, but he knew it was important. On the 5th day, his lawyer called with news. "Jonathan, I need to talk to you about the guardianship situation. It's not going to be as simple as we thought." "What do you mean?" "The story has gotten out. A billionaire CEO taking in 2 unknown children. The media is starting to ask questions, and not all of them are friendly. There's a prosecutor who's concerned about the optics, about whether this is all legal. He's talking about opening an investigation." Jonathan felt anger rise in his chest. "Those girls needed help. I helped them. What's illegal about that?" "Nothing if we do this right. But we need to formalize the guardianship, and we need to do it quickly. I'm filing the paperwork today, but you should be prepared for scrutiny. This is going to get complicated." That evening, Jonathan sat with the twins and tried to explain in terms they could understand that some people had questions, that there might be some difficult times ahead, but that he wasn't going to let anyone take them away. "We trust you," Emily said simply, and the weight of that trust was heavier than any business deal Jonathan had ever closed. The investigation began the next week. Social workers came to interview the girls, to inspect the penthouse, to question Jonathan's motives. He endured it all with patience, providing documentation, answering questions, allowing them to see that Emily and Emma were thriving. But the media attention was harder to control. Headlines questioned his intentions. Anonymous comments online suggested darker motives. Jonathan, who had always valued his privacy, found himself thrust into a spotlight he had never wanted. Through it all, he continued his own investigation into Sarah Richardson's past. What he discovered surprised him. She had been a nurse, well liked by her colleagues and patients. She had volunteered at free clinics, had a reputation for kindness and dedication. But she had fallen on hard times financially, had been trying to raise money for a pediatric ward renovation project. The private investigator found people who remembered her singing to sick children, staying late to comfort worried parents. This wasn't a woman who had abandoned her children. This was a woman who had been trying desperately to build a better life for them, who had been interrupted by cruel fate. And then came the breakthrough that changed everything. A hospital volunteer saw the news coverage and called Jonathan's office. "I worked with Sarah Richardson," he said. "There's something you need to know." She was about to file a formal complaint about medical negligence at the hospital where she worked. There were doctors covering up a serious mistake, and Sarah had evidence. She was scared. She told me someone had threatened her, told her to keep quiet. In the days before the incident, she was constantly looking over her shoulder. Jonathan felt the pieces clicking into place. "Are you saying the accident might not have been an accident?" "I'm saying Sarah Richardson was a careful person. She wouldn't have walked into traffic unless she was running from something. Or someone." The implications were staggering. Jonathan contacted the police, shared what he had learned, demanded a full investigation into the circumstances of Sarah's accident. He hired additional security for the penthouse, for the twins, unwilling to take any chances. And through it all, he visited Sarah every day, talking to her, urging her to wake up, to come back to her daughters who needed her. On the 14th day, as Jonathan sat beside her bed reading aloud from the children's book he had found in the pink suitcase, Sarah Richardson's eyes fluttered open. Sarah Richardson's eyes opened slowly, struggling to focus in the harsh hospital light. The first thing she saw was the photograph on the bedside table. Two little girls with dark hair and matching smiles, safe and clean and happy. Her breath caught in her throat. "Emily," she whispered. "Emma." Jonathan, who had been reading quietly, nearly dropped the book. He pressed the call button for the nurse and leaned forward, his heart pounding. "Ms. Richardson? Sarah? Can you hear me?" Her eyes moved to him, confusion clouding her features. "Who are you? Where are my daughters?" "They're safe," Jonathan said quickly, urgently. "I'm Jonathan Hartwell. I found them at Pike Place Market. They're at my home, being cared for. They're safe, I promise you." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. "I told them to wait. I told them I would come back. I just needed to get help. I just needed to find someone who could protect them from—" She stopped abruptly, her face going pale. "From what?" Jonathan asked gently. "Sarah, what were you running from?" But Sarah's eyes had gone distant, her brow furrowing. "I don't remember. I remember leaving them under the awning. I remember the rain. I remember being so scared, but I can't remember why. I can't remember what happened after I left them." Dr. Martinez entered the room, her face breaking into a smile when she saw Sarah awake. "Welcome back, Ms. Richardson. You've been with us for 2 weeks. How are you feeling?" "Confused," Sarah said honestly. "My head hurts and I can't remember. Why can't I remember?" "You suffered a significant head injury," Dr. Martinez explained. "Some memory loss is normal. It may come back with time, or it may not. The important thing is that you're awake and your vital signs are stable." Over the next hour, as doctors examined Sarah and asked questions, Jonathan stepped out to make a phone call. "Mrs. Chen, she's awake. Can you bring the girls to the hospital? They need to see their mother." When Emily and Emma walked into the hospital room an hour later, holding Mrs. Chen's hands, they froze in the doorway. Sarah, propped up in the hospital bed, let out a sob. "My babies," she whispered. The twins ran to her, and Sarah wrapped her arms around them as best she could with the IV lines still attached. All three of them were crying, holding each other as if they would never let go. Jonathan stood back, giving them space. But Emily looked up and reached out a hand to him. "Mr. Jonathan saved us, Mama," she said. "He gave us food and a warm bed, and he looked for you every day." Sarah looked at Jonathan over her daughters' heads, her eyes full of gratitude and questions. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank you for keeping them safe." "They're remarkable girls," Jonathan said. "You raised them well." Over the next few days, as Sarah recovered physically, the pieces of the puzzle began to come together. The police investigation into her accident revealed that there had been a witness who saw a car accelerate towards Sarah rather than brake. The driver had fled the scene, and the vehicle had been found abandoned 2 days later, reported stolen. The hospital volunteer who had contacted Jonathan came forward officially, providing a written statement about the medical negligence case Sarah had been investigating. With this information, the police opened a formal investigation into whether Sarah had been deliberately targeted. But Sarah herself still couldn't remember the details. She remembered her work as a nurse, remembered her daughters, remembered struggling financially and trying to find help for the pediatric ward project. But the days leading up to the accident were a blur, fragments that wouldn't quite come into focus. "I remember being afraid," she told Jonathan during one of his visits. "I remember thinking that I needed to get Emily and Emma somewhere safe, somewhere away from me, but I can't remember why." Jonathan showed her the bracelet, explained the Morse code message. 12 and hope. "Does that mean anything to you?" Sarah's fingers trembled as she touched the beads. "I made this for Emily." I wanted her to have something to hold on to, something that would remind her that I loved her. But I don't remember what the 12 means. The answer came from an unexpected source. One of Sarah's former colleagues, a nurse named Jennifer, came to visit her in the hospital. When she saw the bracelet, her eyes widened. "Room 12, she said. "Sarah, don't you remember? Room 12 was where the patient was harmed. That's what you were investigating." Slowly, painfully, the memories began to return. Sarah had discovered that a young patient in room 12 had been given the wrong medication by a doctor who was working while impaired. Instead of reporting the mistake, several staff members had covered it up, falsified records, and the child had suffered permanent harm. Sarah had collected evidence, had been preparing to go to the medical board, and then she had started receiving threats. Anonymous messages telling her to keep quiet, a car that followed her home from work, a sense of being watched constantly. "I was terrified," Sarah said, the memories flooding back now. "I didn't know who I could trust at the hospital. I didn't know if they would come after my daughters. So I took what little money I had, packed their bags, and I brought them to the market. I thought if I left them in a public place, somewhere visible, someone good would find them. Someone who could protect them better than I could." "And then you were going to turn yourself in to the police?" Jonathan asked. "I was going to go to the medical board first, give them all my evidence, but I never made it. I remember crossing the street, and then there was a car, and then nothing." The investigation intensified. With Sarah's testimony and the evidence she had collected, the police were able to identify the doctor who had made the initial mistake and several staff members who had participated in the cover-up. The stolen car was traced back to an associate of one of the doctors involved. But the legal process was slow, and in the meantime Sarah faced a new challenge. She had no home to return to. She had lost her apartment when she couldn't pay rent. She had no job, having been fired from the hospital under suspicious circumstances just before the accident. She had nothing except her daughters and the clothes on her back. Jonathan made a decision that surprised even himself. "Stay at the penthouse," he said. "You and the girls, until you get back on your feet. There's plenty of room, and Emily and Emma are already settled there. It would be disruptive to move them again." Sarah hesitated, her pride warring with her practical needs. "I can't accept charity. You've already done so much." "It's not charity," Jonathan said. "It's the right thing to do. Besides, the girls have gotten used to having me around. I think they'd miss me if you left." It was true. In the weeks that Sarah had been in the hospital, Jonathan had become a fixture in Emily and Emma's lives. He read them bedtime stories, helped them with the educational activities Mrs. Chen created, played simple games with them in the evenings. They had started calling him Mr. Jonathan, with a warmth that made his chest tight. Sarah agreed reluctantly at first, but as the days passed and she saw how happy her daughters were, how safe they felt, she began to relax. Living together created a new dynamic. Sarah was fiercely independent, insisting on helping Mrs. Chen with household tasks, despite still recovering from her injuries. She was also deeply curious about Jonathan, asking questions about his life, his work, his past. "Why did you stop?" she asked one evening after the girls had gone to bed. "That day at the market, why did you stop when everyone else just walked by?" Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. "When I was 7 years old, my mother left me at a bus station. She said she would be back in an hour. She never came back." Sarah's hand went to her mouth. "Jonathan, I'm so sorry." "She didn't abandon me by choice," Jonathan continued. "I found out years later that she had collapsed from an undiagnosed heart condition. By the time she recovered, I was already in the foster system, and she couldn't get me back. She tried for years, but the system fought her at every turn. She passed away when I was 16, still trying. That's heartbreaking. It taught me something important," Jonathan said. "It taught me that sometimes people who look like they're abandoning their children are actually trying desperately to save them. When I saw Emily and Emma sitting there so quietly, so obediently, I saw myself. I saw a mother who had made an impossible choice because she thought it was the only way to keep her children safe. And I couldn't walk away from that." Sarah reached out and took his hand. "You gave them back their childhood. You gave me back my life. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. You don't have to repay me, Jonathan said. Just get better. Be there for your daughters. That's enough. But as the weeks passed, something shifted between them. It started with small things. Sarah would make coffee in the morning and automatically pour a cup for Jonathan the way he liked it. Jonathan would pick up books he thought Sarah might enjoy and leave them on the table for her. They would sit together in the evenings after the girls were asleep, talking about everything and nothing, sharing stories and dreams. And fears. The girls noticed, of course, children always do. "Are you going to be our daddy?" Emma asked Jonathan one morning at breakfast, her voice matter of fact. Jonathan nearly choked on his coffee. Sarah turned bright red. "Emma, that's not a polite question," Sarah said gently. "But I want him to be," Emily chimed in. "He reads us stories and he makes you smile, Mama. You didn't smile before." Jonathan and Sarah looked at each other across the table, and something unspoken passed between them. It was too soon, too complicated, too much had happened. But there was something there, something real and growing. "How about we just focus on being a family of friends right now?" Jonathan suggested. "Is that okay?" The girls nodded, satisfied with that answer for the moment. As Sarah grew stronger, she began to think about the future. She couldn't go back to nursing, not after everything that had happened. But she didn't want to waste the experience she had gained, the knowledge of how the system had failed not just her, but countless others. "I want to start something," she told Jonathan one evening. "A support program for mothers in crisis, women who are facing impossible situations, who need help but don't know where to turn. I want to create a safe place where they can get resources, legal help, temporary housing if they need it. I want to make sure no mother ever has to make the choice I made." Jonathan's eyes lit up. "That's a brilliant idea, and I want to help. Hartwell Technologies has a foundation. We could fund it, provide the infrastructure you need." "I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm offering. Sarah, you've changed my life, you and Emily and Emma. Before I met you, I was just going through the motions. Work, meetings, deals, money, it all felt empty. But now I wake up and I have a reason to be better, to do better. Let me help you build something meaningful." Together, they created the Hope Foundation, named for the message on Emily's bracelet. It started small with a single office and a handful of volunteers, but it grew quickly. Sarah's story, once it became public, inspired others to come forward, to share their own experiences, to offer help. The medical negligence case went to trial 6 months after Sarah woke from her coma. The doctors involved were found guilty, their licenses revoked. The hospital implemented new oversight procedures. The child who had been harmed received compensation and ongoing care. And through it all, the unlikely family that had formed in the wake of tragedy grew stronger. Jonathan found himself changing in ways he never expected. He delegated more at work, spending less time in the office and more time at home. He attended Emily and Emma's school events, helped with homework, learned to braid hair through trial and error that left all 3 of them laughing. Sarah discovered a strength she hadn't, known she possessed. She spoke at conferences, advocated for policy changes, built a network of support that helped hundreds of families. She also learned to accept help, to lean on others, to trust that she didn't have to carry every burden alone. The girls thrived. They made friends at school, joined activities, laughed freely and often. The careful, quiet children who had sat under the awning in the rain became vibrant, confident, joyful. They still had the pink suitcases, kept in their closet as a reminder of where they had been, but they no longer needed them. 1 year after, that rainy day at Pike Place Market, Jonathan took Sarah and the girls back to the spot where it had all begun. The awning was still there, the bench where he had left the note. But now there was something new, a small tree planted in a nearby planter, with a plaque that read, "For those who wait, and those who return." "I had it installed last week," Jonathan said. "I wanted there to be something beautiful here, something that reminds people that even in the darkest moments, there's hope." Sarah slipped her hand into his, and this time neither of them pulled away. "Thank you," she said softly, "for stopping, for seeing us, for giving us a chance." "Thank you," Jonathan replied, "for letting me be part of your family." Emily tugged on Jonathan's sleeve. "Can we go get ice cream now? You promised." Jonathan laughed, scooping her up. "Yes, we can get ice cream. What about you, Emma? What flavor do you want?" As they walked away from the market, the four of them together, they looked like what they had become. A family, not bound by blood but by choice, by the decision to see each other, to help each other, to build something new from the broken pieces of their pasts. 6 months later, Jonathan and Sarah were married in a small ceremony with just close friends and family. Emily and Emma served as flower girls, wearing matching pink dresses that they had chosen themselves. The reception was held at the Hope Foundation's new headquarters, a building that had been funded by donations from people whose lives had been touched by Sarah's work. In his toast, Jonathan spoke about the day he had found the girls under the awning, about how he had thought he was saving them, but they had actually saved him. "I spent my whole life building walls," he said, "protecting myself from being hurt again. But these 3 incredible women taught me that the greatest strength isn't in walls. It's in opening your heart even when you're afraid. It's in choosing to care, to connect, to love, even when it's risky. They taught me that family isn't about biology. It's about showing up. It's about being there, day after day, in the small moments and the big ones." Sarah stood and took the microphone, her voice steady and strong. "A year and a half ago, I made the hardest decision of my life. I left my daughters under an awning in the rain because I thought it was the only way to keep them safe. I was terrified and desperate, and I didn't know if I would ever see them again. But sometimes, when we're at our lowest point, when we've lost all hope, that's when miracles happen. Not the big, dramatic kind, the quiet kind. The kind that comes from one person deciding to stop, to look, to care. Jonathan gave us more than shelter and safety. He gave us a future. He gave us hope, and he gave us a family. The Hope Foundation continued to grow, expanding to multiple cities, helping thousands of families. Sarah became a recognized advocate for healthcare reform and family support services. Jonathan restructured his company to focus more on social impact, using technology to solve real problems for real people. Emily and Emma grew up surrounded by love and stability, never forgetting where they had come from, but no longer defined by it. They kept their beaded bracelets, both of them now, each with their own message in Morse code. Emily's still said hope. Emma's said family. On the anniversary of the day they met, the four of them always returned to Pike Place Market. They would visit the tree, now growing tall and strong, and they would remember. Not with sadness, but with gratitude. Because sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best ones. Sometimes the people we think we're saving are actually saving us. And sometimes family finds you in the most unexpected places, under a green awning in the rain, waiting to be seen.